New poll shows even most Republicans think GOP has gone too far over trans kids. A new poll found that a majority of Democratic, Independent, and even Republican likely voters believe that there's too much legislation aimed at reducing LGBTQ plus rights at the state level. The progressive polling firm and think tank Data for Progress conducted a survey of 1,220 participants and asked about the 429 bills presented at state legislatures attacking LGBTQ plus rights. Most of the bills are aimed at transgender youth, and 17 have already become law this year. 72% of Democratic voters agreed with the statement that there's too much legislation and politicians are playing political theater and using these bills as a wedge issue, and only 20% agreed that it's the right amount of legislation and politicians are dealing with a real danger that needs to be addressed. 65% of independent voters agreed that there is too much anti-LGBTQ plus legislation this year. The more surprising result was that 55% of Republican voters agreed that there is too much anti-LGBTQ plus legislation. Only 33% said that there is the right amount of such bills. Most Democrats, 78%, and most independents, 58%, agree that being trans is natural. Only 34% of Republicans agree that being trans is natural, while a majority, 55%, said that it's a new phenomenon.
This is not surprising to me at all. I run in a lot of red circles and Republican groups. They don't care at all. To your wife's point, they don't care about trans people in a bad way or a good way.
They just don't.
They just don't care. It's not part of their everyday life. It's not part of their nightlife when they're going out. So they're not actively standing up against these anti-trans bills, but they hate that this is what's dominating the news because it has nothing to do with their life. What the political bodies are doing and not addressing the needs that they have. They're pissed off about that. And they're pissed off, about things that maybe Joe Biden or the Democratic Party is, but they don't want to see any more of this. They don't want to see the legislation. And I'm hoping that what we just talked about for the first 20 minutes of this show is something that's going to cause them to come out a little bit more and say, look, enough is enough. And Ron DeSantis, who wants to be a president, this cannot be a guy who's a president for the entire country.
Well, I hope that that's true, Trinidadi. My homeowner's insurance doubled. Okay, we paid $2,300 2 years ago, and last year we paid $5,300 for our homeowner's insurance. We don't have a huge house, okay? How can some people even keep their home? So I hope that those Republicans grow some cojones, right? And if you don't know what that means, ask your local Spanish person, right? Grow some cojones and scream and go, look, you're worried about the drag queens and the trans community. How about my homeowner's insurance? How about that there's no reasonable rentals anywhere in South Florida? How about these things?
Property taxes,
And my question would be, how upset are your Republican friends about this? Are they upset that it's happening? Or are they upset that they're being tied to it? Because it's one thing to say, no, this is bad, and I'm either going to A, vote for Democrat, or I'm just going to sit this election out. It's another thing to say, I like my trans friends, or I like my gay friends, but I'm still going to vote for the fascists in Tallahassee and the fascists that control the House in Washington. Because those are two very different distinctions.
But 90% of them, don't care about politics to begin with. So they're not even, we're obviously very upset about what's going on. Most of them are not even going to know that this is happening until that it actually passes,
it doesn't affect them,
or it's on the TV.
But the question is, would it change their vote though?
But when I talked to
would it change the way that they behave? Because if you can say you don't like fascists, but if you vote for a fascist, you support fascism.
But that makes you a fascist.
They don't think about it that way, though, because when I have conversations with my Republican friends, and I have Republican friends and Trump-supporting friends, and those two are two completely different things, they just care about if that candidate checks the boxes for X, Y, and Z that they believe in, and everything else they don't care about. And I've had this conversation up to last night with a Republican friend of mine and talked to him about like the trans issues and drag and, LGBT and stuff like that. And his response was, it's a non-issue for him. But he would continue voting for Ron DeSantis because he checks the boxes for the other things that he...
Because his pocket, basically.
Yeah, I understand that. When I think about the trans community, and for those that hate on the trans community so much, I always think about the doctor's Hippocratic Oath. The trans community does not require you to like them. They don't require anything. They do require, like a doctor's Hippocratic Oath, do no harm. Yeah. If you will be silent and not harm somebody, you're an ally. of the trans community. It's one of the things that I think. This story is incredibly positive. And here's my spin of how positive it is. Overwhelmingly, Democrats support the trans community. What's going on has gone too far. Overwhelmingly, the independent community has said it's gone too far. 55% is a great number. It's a great number. And the reason it's a great number is what we watched yesterday in Wisconsin. It's the Republicans and the radical GOP's Achilles heel. Wisconsin is the most gerrymandered state in the country. They have figured out, with only 35% of the voting population support of Republicans, to be able to have a supermajority, just like Florida, in having a supermajority in Wisconsin, because they have gerrymandered so badly. One of the places that helped them do that was in the Supreme Court of Wisconsin. And yesterday, they lost. And they not only lost, they lost in a landslide. And now they have turned the Supreme Court to majority blue. And that Supreme Court is going to protect abortion rights, and they're going to turn over the gerrymandered rules that's going to affect Congress and the control of Congress and the control of all kinds of legislative seats in the state of Wisconsin. And that's why this 55% number is so good, because it's a reflection of what happened in Wisconsin is going to happen here. Trans being one of the examples, abortion being one of the examples, LGBT rights in general, support for drag queens, and the ridiculousness of the narrative that people like Ron DeSantis has been able to stand up on his podium and his soapbox and get attention for. But in Wisconsin, they're folding like a house of cards. Every election over the last 6 cycles has been decided between 10 and 15,000 votes on the state level. Yesterday, they lost by 15 points. They were crushed. And the reason is because a very significant number of even conservatives are tired of the bullshit that they're watching in America, and they're starting to turn on them. Wisconsin yesterday was an example of it. 55% saying trans laws on the state level have gone too far is a great number. We can work with 55% because with the Democrats and the independents and just 55%, the GOP loses. Period.
LGBTQ plus news is vital for our community and for the broader world as a whole. We have enough enemies at Fox News. Tucker, Sean, and Laura are loud. We need passionate allies. Happening Out Television Network, Queer News Tonight, and It's Happening Out are literally out of the closet and into the headlines. Our community needs your support. Like this broadcast and subscribe now to ensure the growth of the entire LGBTQ plus community.